Alright, I've got another viewer request video. This one, the person would like to have a buddy box set up and the trainer flying, but if he wants to take over control, he doesn't want to have to flip a switch first and then start flying. He just wants to be able to just move the stick, and as soon as he moves the stick, the master transmitter will now take control of the flying so that we don't crash. So sometimes you're under a pretty close time constraints to take control of a plane if your student's about ready to crash it. So that'll definitely shave off a second or so, which might make the difference. So I see the draw to that, and I'm going to show an example how to set that logic up. And it's going to be kind of separated into two parts. The first part is just setting up the logic to create the trainer mode on-off bit that is controlled. You can turn it on and then turn it off by just moving the sticks. Second part of this is more related to actually getting the trainer to work. In my case, the only one I have to test with the buddy box is my old Spektrum DX6i, and it doesn't really work exactly as I've seen some other people do it with different transmitters. Obviously, if you use another Radiomaster product, it's going to be pretty seamless. But I've got it connected with the little audio jack cable in the back, and then that goes into the top right here. It goes into the top of the Radiomaster. And one quick thing, if you are trying to make this work, just note that you create the model in your Spektrum. My DSXi, I've created a model just called Trainer. So not very visible, but it does say Trainer. There you go. But the key thing here is you leave the power switch off. If you've noticed here, I've got the power switch off. As soon as you plug in the audio jack, it turns it on. If you turn the power switch on, it actually loses connection. So that's a little tip for you. Okay, so let's get started so this doesn't get too long. We need to set up the Radiomaster to allow the trainer box. So you go into your model setup. So click on your model, and then I've got 2.80 on this right now. But we're going to scroll down. In your radio, it may be a little different, but you're going to go to the trainer. And you've got to set this. It'll probably default in off position.
Trainer signal lost.
So yeah, disconnected from the trainer. So you need to set that up for however you want to do it. I'm using the jack because this is the master, and I'm using the headphone jack.
Trainer signal recovered.
So now I've got my trainer signal back. So that's the first thing you want to do is enable that in the particular model that you're using. In my case, I'm just this Bigfoot model is just my experimental model that I have in my radio, so I don't mess up my actual flying airplane. So some of the stuff you see may not be set up properly. I'm just using it for demonstration purposes. So set that up first. Second thing you need to do is go into your system. So I click my sys button. I'm going to use the back arrow here to go back around, but you're going to get to the trainer section. And once you're connected up, you want to make sure you're actually getting trainer signals. I do have data appearing over here that I'm getting signals back from this radio. But as you can see, so if I move the throttle, there's the rudder, elevator, and aileron. And if you're noticing, they don't match what you see over here. And this is just probably my case with this particular transmitter. Unless you happen to be using a DX6i, you may not run into this, but I've found that with this transmitter, these channel assignments don't work. I've tried a bunch of different combinations, and maybe I just haven't figured it out yet, but I can't get the channels to change no matter what I do. Changing this. So the Spektrum uses TAER, so if you notice, when I move my throttle, that's channel 1 on that top one that's lined up with aileron. No matter what I do with these channel buttons, it doesn't move. I've tried reassigning these to AETR, but it doesn't do anything. Aileron, when I move my aileron, that's tied to this elevator channel, and elevator is tied to the throttle channel. So that's kind of irrelevant for this particular tutorial, but I am going to get into that in the second part a little bit more on how I make that work with this, so I can use that as a buddy box. Because I can't use the stick or the channel mode so far. I haven't been able to figure it out, so I have another way to do that. But anyway, so also, you know, you can center all your sticks. Make sure that when you do the calibration, you want to center the throttle stick, and then both of your sticks are centered. And then if you push the calibrate button, so you can see they're all pretty much at zeros right now. It's close enough. The DX6i is not the best radio, so they're a little skittish, the values. But you just hit calibrate from there, and it just zero stuff. Now, the reason I put a multiplier in here is if I have that just at 1, see, I'll move my aileron all the way to one direction. See how it goes to 104? If I set that to 1, so I only have a multiplier of 1, and then I move my aileron all the way, see how it only goes to 80? I want it to go all the way to 100, so I can multiply that. And there's my elevator, that doesn't go down to 100. Same with throttle. So in this particular case, I can't get 100 rates, 100% rates, unless I add a multiplier. So that's what the multiplier does. See, now that I've added that multiplier, now if I move it, I get just over 100%, which the Radiomaster will stop it at 100. I just want to know I get at least 100. I think I found if I go to 1 or 1.2, yeah, it's not quite there. See, I can only get 97. So that's why I selected 1.3 as my multiplier. So you want to do that. If you don't, you may not get full rates, which may not be a problem, but that's the way I've got mine set up. Now that we've got the trainer, we know that it functions the way I'm doing it. It doesn't really matter how I set these up for me. If you're doing yours a little differently, that's up to you. But okay, so now we'll get into actually setting the button to what we want to use. So what we want for this particular scenario is we can't really use a toggle switch. If you use a toggle switch, you know, with anything with the Radiomaster, there's 100 ways to do everything, but the way I set mine up is I want to use a momentary button. So I've moved my momentary toggle over to SF. Most people will have theirs over here on SH, but that doesn't matter. You could use that one if you want, unless you're using that for something different. That's one option. So SF, we could use that. I'm going to show you how to use, for another function, I've used these T5 and T6 trim switches. They're a good momentary switch. You can go up or down with them. But you have to configure that to allow you to use it for that. If it's still set up as a trim switch, it won't work. First option is SF. That's the only momentary toggle you got on your radio, unless you've modified it or added some push buttons. You know, they do have options to add push buttons to these little positions in the back. So that is another option for you if you've added a button. So SF, or I'm going to do my demonstration using T5. So if I push T5 up, I don't know if you can hear this. It says trainer on. And then if I move my stick,
Disabled.
it says disabled. You can have it say trainer off, but trainer on, trainer off, it sounds the same on the radio. It's not distinctive enough, so I use the disabled audio track. So I'm using the T5, but let me show you how I get that set up. You've got to make it available to use as something else if it's still set up as a trim switch. All right, so go to our model. Okay, we're going to go to flight modes. Now, if you're using your different flight modes, this step might be a little different. I don't use these flight modes, at least for this model. So I'm going to go to flight mode 0, and that's the default flight mode everything's going to be in. If I go down to setup, I have modes for all these different trim switches. Now, default, it's going to be like this. In that mode, that T5 and T6 are going to be used as trim switches. If I click on the T5 here, and that little number goes away, so now that trim switch is able to be used as a switch for anything. Same with T6. If I want to turn that off, now I can use T6 for something I need a momentary switch for. So for now, I'm just going to use the T5. Okay, so I'll back out of that. Now we'll get into the meat of it. Let me back out of this. Let's go across. We're going to create some logical switches. I need 4 of them for this. So here's the first one. Now you can put these in any logical switch you want. For simplicity, I've got them organized, 1 through 4, but they can be, anywhere in the list. You just need to keep track of which logical switch is which for you. So the first one, the function is the, a is greater than x, but it's the absolute value of a. So that means it can be positive or negative. So we're going to select that one. Okay. So I'll create it as we go here. So the first one here, I'm going to use aileron. And this part is really important. You need to use the aileron stick. Okay, there's a difference. This is the aileron input. This is the aileron stick. It's extremely important that you use the stick and not the input, because the input is subject to trims and do different rates and things, and if you use the input, it might have that signal modified, and it may not trigger the thing to turn off. If let's say you adjust your trim outside of the range we're looking for this function to be true, then it won't work. And I have an upcoming video where I'll show you exactly why that's important. Because I had a plane that just took off on me out of control and I couldn't do anything about it. It wouldn't disable when I moved the stick. Anyway, so I set it for 10. It doesn't really matter. It's basically once you move the stick, the aileron stick, more than 10% plus or minus, it's going to activate logical switch LO1. So that's all I need to do for that one. We'll back out of this. Now we'll take a look at L2. It's the exact same thing, but I've done it with the elevator stick, and note again, I'm using the stick, not the input. Okay, LO3 is an OR function. I'm looking at if LO1 or LO2 has activated. So basically, if I move the aileron, see if I move the aileron, let me back out so you can see what I'm doing. So if I move the aileron, aileron turns on and LO3. If I move the elevator, the LO2 and LO3 turn on. So you can see that I'm getting a response based on stick movement. Now I didn't bother with throttle or rudder. You can do the same thing with that. You'll just have to add a couple more OR statements down here if you want to do that one. But the way I've set it up, you just have to move the aileron or the elevator to get this to function. So the last one on here is the sticky LO4. Now this is the bit that actually turns on and off your trainer mode. So we'll take a look at that one. And this is a sticky bit, and I've got it controlled by 5U currently. That's my trim switch number 5 right here. If I push that up, that's what that 5U means. And it's also looking at LO3. So if I move, that means if I'm it unsticks that LO4. So when I first put trim switch 5 up, it latches that bit LO4, and then if I move the stick to activate LO3, that disables that, so it turns it off. So back out of this and I'll show you what I'm doing here. So I'm pushing, you can't see me, but I'm up here, I'm pushing trim switch 5 up. So you can see it just activated LO4 and it's on, so it's stuck. Now if I move the aileron or the elevator, it's going to activate LO3.
Disabled.
Now it turned off LO4. So there's your trainer mode, LO4. It turns that on and off. This is the part that's probably would confuse a lot of people, because you're not actually turning trainer mode on and off in the typical sense. If you're going to use a toggle switch for this, let me move over. Special functions. The only thing I'm doing in special functions on this particular scenario is playing my audio tracks. This is trainer on, and then this is disabled. So I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but let me turn the volume up a little.
Trainer on.
So trainer on, LO4. When LO4 is activated, it plays trainer on. Take a quick look at that one. So I'm just playing a track, trainer on. You can say whatever you want. You can make your own track. The exclamation point 1x means that when you turn the radio on, it doesn't do anything. If you leave that at 1x, like that, every time you turn the radio on, it'll say that. if that mode is activated. So I don't like it to do that for this. It's not necessary. The other audio track I'm playing is the disabled one, and I use the exclamation point in front of it. Exclamation point LO4 means when the LO4 is not on. That's what the exclamation point means. And I'm just playing the track disabled. Again, I've got the exclamation point 1X. Okay. Now I have a way to turn my trainer mode on and off. However you turn your trainer mode on and off, that's one way to do it.
Trainer on.
So now you have a means to activate that mode. But now here's the difference. So what you might think you want to do is go in here and create a control. I'm going to use LO4. Now I'm not going to, this isn't the option we're going to use, but I'm just showing you what most people would think you're going to do. Now I could use LO4 as my switch, trainer, and then I could activate one of my trainer modes. Now, number one, first and foremost, you cannot use sticks. And the reason you can't use sticks is because when you have sticks turned on, it emulates the actual Radiomaster sticks. And if you turn that on, it's going to disable your trainer mode with the logic we've created as soon as the student moves the sticks. So you can't use sticks. You may or may not be able to use these, but I don't think so, because these are also emulating the specific sticks. This is if you just want the student to only have access to one control surface. And then if you select channels, channels might work. In my case, it does not work because I can't get the channels to remap. So I don't do anything with this. So this isn't necessary. I'm going to back out of that. I'm just showing you that in case it does for yours, but I'm going to delete that because I am not doing that. So the way I'm doing this is I've created dual rates. Let me go back in and show you what I've done. How. So now you have your mode. LO4 is your switch on and off, and it works just fine. Let me demonstrate that for you. If I activate my trainer mode,
Trainer on.
and now if I go over here, so I've got my throttle. You can see now my throttle on this one is moving the throttle over there, rudder, and if you can see, I do have it mapped right. It's mapped for AETR. So aileron is the first one, even though throttle is the first one on this. I've remapped them. So there's my aileron, there's my elevator, throttle, and rudder. And I actually do have channel. There's my flat channel. You can do that too. So let me show you how I've done that. And then as soon as I move this,
Disabled.
now I've got control over it again. So let me show you how I've set up my trainer modes in here, because this is a little different part of the video, but I figured I need to show you this in case you run into something similar, because I can't use it the other way. So I'm going to my model. I don't need anything in my inputs. What I am going to do is come over here to my mixer. So any control surface that you want the student to have control over, I'm adding a mix for that. Okay, so the very first one, I basically just went in here and I did insert after, and I created a copy of that. But now this is going to be my normal one. This is the master's control. I go to edit that one. I want this mode enabled. I've got exclamation point LO4. So that's going to be enabled when I'm not in trainer mode. That way I've got control. Here's I'm moving the stick on the master. Okay, and I've made a copy of that. Now this is the trainer's basically mix. And as my source, I'm using TR2. That's trainer channel 2. So trainer channel 2, if you know the Spektrum, is TAER. So aileron is the channel 2 of the trainer in my case. So that's why I'm using trainer 2. And it's enabled when LO4 is turned on. So my switch is LO4. So when LO4 is on, this trainer mode is active. So if I activate my trainer mode,
Trainer on.
now I come over here to my Spektrum, my buddy box, and I move my ailerons. Now I can do that. Now if I move it to the right, you can see my ailerons moving to the left. If that's backwards, this is important. Normally I would instruct you to go to your outputs to do any channel inversion. You go to your aileron, edit it, and you would go down here to invert, like that. In this case you don't, because you need your master radio to still be synchronized properly. So if your buddy box control surfaces are backwards, go to your mix. We're going to go into my aileron trainer. I'm going to edit that. And you're going to go to your weights and you're going to change it from plus 100 to minus 100. Now, normally we don't do this when it's just on your local radio. This is not the way you normally invert an output. I'm only doing that because I'm doing the trainer box. I need to set it up so that it meshes with the actual radio. So if I go to minus 100 now,
Disabled. Trainer
turn my trainer on, I move right aileron. Now my line moves to the right. If I go left, so I've reversed those rates. Now if I move my Radiomaster, my master stick,
disabled.
there's left aileron, right aileron, so they match up. So that's how you would invert your signal on the buddy box. That's important. Don't do it in your outputs if it's only for the buddy box, because otherwise, as soon as you switch back to master control, your aileron is going to be reversed, and you're going to have a whole lot of fun trying to get that plane landed. Okay, so that's how you set that up. Now, if I go between, see how you see it's highlighted now on the master control. If I activate, let me back it out. If I activate right here on my T5 switch, if I activate my buddy box mode,
Trainer on.
you can see how these just move down. And then if I move my stick,
Disabled.
and I switch back to that control. Okay, now I just need to go through and do the same thing for each of the control surfaces I want the trainer to be access to. So, same thing for elevator. See, I've got this one's enabled when I'm not in LO4, and the trainer 3, remember TAER, my elevator is trainer channel 3 for my Spektrum in my case. So I've got TR3 as my source when LO4 is activated. There's my throttle, same thing. And then my rudder, same thing, TR4. So you just need to know which channel you're using. So that's how I've got mine set up to use. And just for kicks, I threw in my flap switch. This is trainer channel 6. That happens to be my flaps. So that uses the flap switch on the Spektrum. Now if I disable that,
Disabled.
now I'm back to the flap switch on this if I happen to have flaps on that model. And you don't have to give the trainer or the student access to flaps. It all depends on what you're trying to teach them on. Anyway, so that's how you set up your different mixes to allow you to switch back and forth between the trainer and the master. And it'll accomplish exactly what you need to do. And it's like I said before, if you're going to invert the signals, you do that in your mix specifically for the trainer. Don't do anything in here. If you've already had your model set up and functioning from the master, you don't need to change any of this. Your model works fine from your master. You're only changing what the student instructs your plane to do. So I think that takes care of that. I hope that was informative and helpful and give you some ideas. Kind of think outside the box. Any instructions, any tips for any of the other viewers, put them in the comments below. The community is pretty great. We share ideas and thoughts, and I like sharing these things to show you different ways to do certain things. And there's just so many ways to do everything. There's probably 5, 10 different ways to do what I've done here, but that's just one method that I thought of. It seems to work pretty smoothly, and thanks for watching. Have a good day.